Good morning. Welcome back to the Sunday Serving Channel, the place for gospel joy, fire,
Happy Sunday, everyone.
light, salt,
Yeah.
inspiration, and yeah, TJ, it's a blue jacket day because this cold just won't give up
Yeah.
up here in New York.
Looking forward to
So
spring.
we need to fire our souls up with some gospel, and luckily we want to continue on with the Sermon on the Mount. So the next passage is the salt and the light part. Are you ready to read that in a minute?
Sure. I'll put it.
Let's just do that, and then
Yeah,
maybe
that's
we
good.
can reflect on
That's
some
great.
stories about what that actually means.
That's fantastic.
So could you read that from Matthew 5?
Yeah. Here is Matthew 5:13. I'll just start with that part. Or should I read the light part as well?
Do both, yeah.
Okay, good. You are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven.
Wow, beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think that's important that we think of those two themes together.
Yeah.
Jesus telling us to be the salt
Yeah.
and explaining what that is, the salt of the earth, and the light.
Yeah.
So let's sort of briefly comment on that and then find some stories.
Yeah.
Salt. Take salt. Break that down. What does salt mean?
Well,
What's salt good for?
I guess there's a couple of things, like it's good for flavoring food and it's a preservative. If you're, if you have meat that you're not going to barbecue, you pack it in salt and it preserves it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. There's these things in the Old Testament that say that when you make an offering, you're supposed to make it always with salt. Add salt to every offering because God compares the covenant to salt, the covenant that He made.
So
with
that's
people.
an old theme. It was found in the laws of Moses.
Yeah.
And of course, we're talking about in context, a time in history when prior to refrigeration. So salt was a known preservative. So I think that's, we definitely think of salt as we need to preserve God's laws and ways in the world.
Yeah.
But not only that, I think it is also, don't you think it's also biblical to talk about salt as a positive influence of flavor? Like
I think
a little spice, a little salt,
Yeah, and I think because when
cheer things up a bit.
When it talks about the offerings, it often pairs, like it talks about salt, like in Leviticus chapter 2, it talks about salt, and then it says to make an offering a pleasing aroma to the Lord.
So pleasing aroma. So come on, stop being so bland, boring.
Yeah.
You gotta get a bit of salt, right?
Yeah.
And that could be humor too. That could be.
Yeah.
But so it's that salty word that preserves, that sometimes hurts in a wound a bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Provokes a bit for righteousness, for God.
Yeah.
And it's also flavoring. It's joy. It's aroma.
Yeah.
So and then light. That's a little more obvious, but let's talk about it. So light. Don't you think it's also like almost maybe more? But I think of two functions there. You can illuminate. You can bring light. You can't see without light.
Right.
You turn on a light and you can see. You use a flashlight to peer into dark corners.
Right.
So it illuminates. But it's also, isn't light also a beacon? Like in the distance, if you look in the mountain, there's a light on that tower, or out in sea in a lighthouse.
Yeah.
It's not illuminating your place around you, but it's showing you where to go. It's a sign of hope. It's, hey, that direction, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So light illuminates. We can't see without it.
Yeah.
And it gives us direction.
Yeah.
The light of Jesus, the love of Jesus.
There's two passages in Isaiah where God says to the people, I have given you as a light to the nations.
Yeah.
And I think, so when Jesus says that to his disciples, he's obviously bringing something new. So I think he adds another layer of meaning on it. Whoever whoever accepts him and his teaching can be that light.
Yeah. This is interesting, TJ.
Yeah.
I didn't plan this, but we're down here and there's a smoldering burn pile.
Yeah.
It looks to me like at one point that was blazing. That must have had flames going 20 feet up, burning the brush here.
Yeah.
I bet that brought light. I don't know about salt.
No.
but brought, well, maybe some salt.
Yeah, some road salt.
Saltpeter. Yeah, salt. Anyways, light and warmth.
Yeah.
And it reminds me, let's look for a story in the Old Testament that it gives an example of salt and light.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of someone that stood up for God.
Yeah. Who wasn't
and
afraid.
then taught those around him, and who wasn't afraid.
Yeah.
And I love that story in Daniel of 3 Jewish men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and this emperor, this King Nebuchadnezzar. Should we take the time to read some of that at least?
Sure, yeah.
So that's Daniel 3, I think. As an example of salt and light. So maybe I should summarize. It gets kind of long. I'll summarize a little bit. But there's some great words in it. So King Nebuchadnezzar was this despotic ruler who's probably a megalomaniac, narcissist, but he was king, right? Whatever he said went. If he wrote a law, that was it.
Yeah.
And but I guess at the time, the Jewish diaspora, there were these 3 men, and maybe others, living there who were wonderful, capable people, and the king had recognized them and put them in places of position in the government. Anyway, it says the king made this decree. Well, first of all, he built this big statue, said out of gold, in his likeness, 90 feet high, right, 20 feet wide, and he made this law, this executive order, whatever it was, that at the sound, I got to read this part because I love this part here. He says, where's the part about the instruments? Here, but when you hear the sound of the horn, the pipe, the lyre, the trigon, the harp, the bagpipe, and every kind of music, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be cast into a burning, fiery furnace. Therefore, as soon as all the people heard the sound of the horn, the pipe, the lyre, the trigon, the harp, the bagpipe, and every kind of music, all the people, nations, languages, everybody, it says, fell down and worshiped the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar set up. Now, I remember being read that story as a kid, and the names of those instruments always fascinated me, but there was a couple different ones like the lyre and the harp. But I remember it ended with a sackbut, and I always wondered what that was. Do you know what a sackbut was?
No.
And why isn't it in ESV?
So, I mean, it's a bit of a complicated answer, but that part of Daniel is one of the few parts in the whole Old Testament that's written fully in Aramaic, and there's a different version of the same story that's written in Greek, and people don't know which one came first.
Okay.
And so our
sackbuts are Greek.
Yeah, sackbuts are Greek.
What are they?
It's probably a bagpipe.
Bagpipe. It makes sense. Sack, right?
Similar to a bagpipe.
Yeah. Okay.
So the translators put the two together.
Okay. So nicer word, bagpipe.
Yeah.
Anyways, so he had called all the, and it specifically says in the beginning of this who he called together: the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the magistrates, and all the officials. So this gathering wasn't just the people. This was all the important people throughout the kingdom, right? And they were all supposed to fall down immediately at the sound of these instruments. So pomp and circumstance, to worship the statue, to worship King Nebuchadnezzar. Now, so what's the point? Well, therefore, at that time, certain Chaldeans came forward and maliciously accused the Jews. They declared to King Nebuchadnezzar, "O king, live forever. O you, king, have made a decree." And again, it repeats it about the sackbuts and all that. There are certain Jews who have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, pay no attention to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in his furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought. So they brought these men before the king. And Nebuchadnezzar answered and said to them, "Is it true, O Shadrach?" And that's interesting. He asked them, "Is it?" He didn't just take they were accused, right? He says, "Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up?" Now if you are ready, when you hear the sound of the horn, the pipe, the lyre, the trigon, the harp, the bagpipe, and every kind of music, to fall down and worship the image that I have made, well and good. But, well and good, but if you do not worship, you shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands? I'm just going to go on a bit, and then we'll talk about it. Is that good?
Because one of the best lines is still coming.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If this be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with fury, and the expression of his face was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He ordered the furnace be heated up 7 times more than it usually was heated, and he ordered some of the mighty men of his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their cloaks and in their tunics, their hats and their other garments, and they were thrown into the burning fiery furnace. Because the king's order was urgent, the furnace was overheated. The flames of the fire killed the men who took Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell bound into the fiery burning furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and rose up in haste. He declared to his counselors, Did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire? They answered and said to the king, Oh, true, king, yes, we did. He answered and said, But I see 4 men unbound, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near the door of the burning fiery furnace and declared, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here. Then Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego came out of the fire. And the satraps, the prefects, the governors, and the king's counselors gathered together and saw that the fire had not any power over the bodies of those men. The hair of their heads was not singed, their cloaks were not harmed, no smell of fire came on them. And Nebuchadnezzar answered and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants, who trusted in him and set aside the king's command and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree, any people, nation, or language that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses laid in ruins. For there is no other God who is able to rescue in this way than the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. So that's a long story, but I kind of enjoy reading that. And
it's great.
And let's link that. I mean, obviously these men were showing the salt and the light to the world in their time.
And the best line, or at least my favorite line of the whole story, is when they say that God can rescue them, but even if He doesn't. Even if He doesn't, we're still not going to.
Our God is able to rescue us. They didn't presume that He would. They knew, they had the faith that He was able. So if we are ever in a bind like that, where our lives are at risk, we got to make a choice. Are we faithful to God?
Because, I mean, you think about it, like persecution of the early Christians, persecution even now. God doesn't rescue everyone, but they still have faith in Him.
And they even added that. But in any case, if He doesn't, know that we will never worship a false God. We worship God in heaven.
That's strength.
Isn't that salt?
Yeah, that's salt.
That's preserving. That's flavoring.
Yeah.
It's also light, really, too, because but then that part about so the king had him thrown in and the guards were killed, and there's one version where it says he heard them singing. Does that ring a bell with you?
Yeah, I can't remember which version it is, but it's in one of the, like I said, there's the translators put together multiple witnesses. So I'm sure it's in one of them.
But then he talks about, hey, and we see, then we throw 3 men in, we see 3 men walking unbound, unharmed, their clothes aren't burning, and a 4th whose likeness is the Son of God, he says.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Jesus is there in the fire
Yeah.
with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. There's the light, right?
Yeah.
The light of Jesus.
Yeah.
I mean, it must have like lit the room up.
Yeah.
So, and he recognized that
Yeah.
and called them out.
Yeah.
So, look what could happen when we're willing to be the salt and the light of the earth. I wonder what impact that had on the others, even on the people that were jealous of them, the Chaldeans.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe they repented, maybe they saw. I mean, the king did. He changed.
Yeah.
He made this decree. He basically said, all the rest of you that don't believe go in the furnace, right?
Yeah.
I wonder if, do you think Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego pushed back against that a little bit? Said,
I don't know.
that's not such a great idea.
There's one more detail. Do we have time to talk about one more thing?
I mean,
so
they can hang up if they don't want to listen.
Yeah. So it just helps. It kind of bolsters this whole thing about their bravery and their being salt. Is their names. So in the beginning of the book of Daniel, it talks about how they had Hebrew names.
Yeah.
Hananel, Mishael, and Azariah. But then here they have Babylonian names.
Huh.
And those Babylonian names are religious names about Babylonian gods.
Really?
Like Abednego means servant of Nego, which is, Nego is a Babylonian god.
Abednego is Abednego?
Yeah, like...
I got to tell you a story about that.
Yeah.
So we'll finish your part first.
Well, I'm just saying, like, even though their names were about Babylonian gods, and even though, like, everyone tried to kind of fit them in, they didn't fit in. They were salt. That's the point.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So think about that, because they could have, at that moment, said, hey, you know, we worship God. What's so bad of just putting on this appearance for 5 minutes just to kind of not make a ruckus so that we can continue worshiping God?
Yeah.
But the point was they know, and that takes time in life. There are times, no, we can't go along with this. Our conscience says, no, we cannot be untrue. We cannot be unfaithful to our God, to our Jesus. We have to be the salt. Yeah. And but they didn't they didn't make a public protest either.
No.
They were just doing their thing.
They just quietly refused.
And they didn't show up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's important too. Like, I don't think you have to make a show of it.
We don't have to be posturing and like...
But you have to be real, genuine. You have to be willing to stand up. Yeah. And then when they were outed, they didn't back down.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's important. Yes, it's important to worship God.
Yeah.
But this shows that it's equally important to not worship the world.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He who loves the world does not love God.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. 1 John. Yeah.
1 John. So love Jesus, not the world.
Yeah.
So, you know, worshiping the Lord, worshiping God is important. But I think sometimes we can get carried away and think that if we worship God and praise and all that, and then we are actually bowing down to idols in our lives.
Yeah.
That's not salt.
Yeah, I agree.
That's not light.
Yeah.
So
it has to be lived out.
There's lots we can learn from this story of what is salt, what is light, how do we be that? And there's an example from the Old Testament of being salt and light. In this case, God is able to save, and he did save. Yeah. And that's a miracle. There are times where it doesn't happen, but even then, know that I will not bow down to idols, I will worship only God. So my story, TJ, is, I love this story because it reminds me of my childhood. My father used to read Bible stories to us in the evening. Yeah. We had this one tradition. Yeah. When I was really little. Yeah. He'd pick us up. When he'd put us into bed, he'd say, Shadrach, Meshach, and to bed we go. And he'd throw us into bed. So that's why I love the story.
That's great.
Anyways, God bless you. Have a wonderful week. And we'll see where we are next week. But it'll be more gospel.
Yeah.
Take care.
Zoom in on the dumpster fire down there.
Wow, I wonder if that's like 10 times hotter.
Oh, dear.